Some actors stay within a comfort zone. Robert Pattinson's comfort zone is a moving target, a constantly shifting boundary that he never lets settle into predictability. He doesn't just choose unconventional roles, he inhabits emotional extremes. From brooding supernatural heartthrob to existential anti-hero, from silent lonely survivor to explosive emotional wreck, from claustrophobic madness to stoic crusader. What unites these performances is a rare courage and curiosity, a willingness to let the camera linger on his uncertainty, to let his voice tremble when it should be steady, and to let the silence speak louder than any line. If range were a destination, he'd be the one already on the runway, passport stamped in genres we haven't even invented yet. Let's start off with Twilight. As Pattinson's breakout role, Edward Cullen could have been a one-nosed, brooding vampire, but he insisted on an intensity that sometimes even worried the studio. Director Catherine Hardwicke had said she wanted an actor who didn't seem like a real person who has lived for 90-something years. He's ethereal, he's special, he's unique, he's internal, he's brooding. Pattinson embodied that almost painfully. He famously took the emo aspect very seriously, even when executives told him to lighten up. He recalled being told to smile a little bit or be fired, but he argued that any happier take would make Edward seem even more like a psychopath. In the film, he often appears almost silent and tortured, conveying a mix of fascination and fear about his forbidden love, and this brooding stillness actually served the Romeo and Juliet-style romance in the movie. On set, he forged strong chemistry with Kristen Stewart, and she noted his approach was intellectual even as he half-heartedly feigned indifference, which matched her own instinct to hold back emotion while dialing up the intensity. In short, Pattinson played Edward as a noble, self-controlled predator, for whom every glance and word is weighed with consequence. Looking back, it's clear that even in Twilight he was aiming for depth. He saw teenage passion as something best underplayed. If you can barely talk to each other, it's incredibly serious all the time, he explained. And he refused to let Edward become a grinning heartthrob, keeping the performance almost monkish in its seriousness. In this way, his work supported the film's theme of dangerous, obsessive love, with Edward's restraint and gravity underscoring the idea that even immortals feel humanity's weight. Moving on to the Batman, Pattinson faced an almost opposite challenge. Here, he had to be imposing and physically present, yet also furtive and emotional. He threw himself into the role and into the grueling suit and prosthetics, admitting that on first wearing the cowl, he literally felt the character's menace, saying, "I'd be scared of this guy if he's walking down an alley," but then discovered that working in that armor introduced a whole host of unforeseen issues. As a result, he had to continually reconfigure his performance at each new obstacle, learning to emote through body language under heavy gear. Co-star Zoe Kravitz later said she helped him enormously. Knowing she wouldn't judge him during rehearsals was kind of a relief for a nervous Pattinson still reeling from his earlier fame. In the film, Bruce Wayne is haunted and almost childlike with guilt, while Batman is reserved and hard-edged. Pattinson leaned into both facets. He deepened his voice and sharpened his gaze as Batman, but also revealed a vulnerable, solitary man beneath the mask. He enjoyed that this Batman is more detective than puncher. In fact, he himself noted that unlike other Batman, he's having conversations, and there are emotional scenes between him and the police. Moments like Batman quietly discussing clues or expressing grief are the norm for such a character, and Pattinson makes them count. His icy intelligence in these scenes balances against moments of raw physicality. When he finally does fight or grieve, it feels earned. In interviews, director Matt Reeves appreciated that he could appear both intimidating in stances and surprisingly human in moments of doubt. Pattinson captured that duality, giving Batman a soul while still making a figure of legend. Up next, the Lighthouse. This time, Pattinson's performance there is entirely about disintegration. Shot in claustrophobic black and white, he and Willem Dafoe play two lighthouse keepers slowly losing their minds. Pattinson never held anything back. To portray the boundless drunken rage and delusion of his character, Thomas Wake, he resorted to extreme physical methods. He admitted he went to great vomitous lengths, literally making himself throw up between takes, and even wetting himself so that the revulsion and sickness on screen would be real. He also improvised by spinning on ship's planks with a stone tied to his foot, inducing real imbalance and nausea. The result is feral and unsettling. In every scene, Pattinson is like a live wire. He said later that nearly every shot was a high-intensity psychological breakdown for his character. He would wander the set, walking around in circles, muttering while the cameras rolled, trapped in that manic state. Director Robert Eggers wanted that authenticity, knowing that once water sprays on him and the filth of the lighthouse closes in, Pattinson would instinctively collapse into the madness of Thomas. And it worked perfectly. He became quieter and more wild simultaneously. By the end, the audience barely sees the original man left. This supporting performance left Dafoe, who intentionally stayed more reserved in rehearsal so Pattinson could bounce off him, reacting spontaneously. In short, Pattinson's performance here violently supports the film's theme of isolation-induced insanity. Where earlier roles had him holding himself back, The Lighthouse has him fully let loose. It's a raw, almost bestial fury cloaked in the veneer of a seaman. Good Time shows yet another side of Pattinson's range. As Connie Nikas, he plays a small-time criminal whose gutless desperation fuels the story. The Safdie brothers' gritty New York setting demanded intense commitment. Pattinson slimmed down by 40 pounds, living on tuna and porridge, all to physically inhabit Connie's jittery frame. He even stayed in character off-camera, roaming late-night corner delis and rough neighborhoods unseen. "I'd head straight home and crash in corner delis, unrecognized," he said, just to be sure he felt like a street kid. Connie himself is a pathological liar and risk-taker. Pattinson understood him as an actor in his own life, a shapeshifter who spins tall tales without thinking about them. In practice, this meant Pattinson played Connie as charming and glib one moment, frantically panicked the next. He captures Connie's swagger in street bars and dives, but also his creeping panic as each scheme unravels. One moment he's confidently hustling, the next he's driven to the verge of mental collapse. The film's theme is a twisted love for his brother, and Pattinson never lets Connie's bitterness turn boring. Directors Josh and Benny Safdie noted that Connie is ultimately a scumbag who manipulates those around him without mercy, and Pattinson sells that ruthlessness. At the same time, he finds flashes of vulnerability. When faced with Jennifer Jason Leigh's worldly and wounded character, there's a brief sense that Connie's deeper loneliness shows through. He does all of this while riding a wave of adrenaline, snorting some donut powder, sweating in neon lights, arguing with cops. And yet he never looks like a cartoon. Every lie and betrayal registers on Pattinson's taut features. In short, for Good Time, Pattinson created Connie as a consummate survivor. Quick-talking, hyper-alleged, alternately angry and terrified, and in doing so he underlined the film's themes of desperation and dysfunctional loyalty. A few years later came Tenant. As Neil, Pattinson again shifts gears. This time he's suave, nimble, and, spoiler alert, oddly unflappable, even in a story about reverse-time terrorism. Nolan's script makes Neil a charismatic enigma, and Pattinson played him with a light touch. Critics noted that he really shines in a playful register that he's not often allowed to use. In other words, he's cool and often casually witty around John David Washington's protagonist, not moody or brooding. He throws off quips and flashes a grin where many Nolan characters wouldn't. At the same time, he never loses an undercurrent of mystery, a slight sadness in the eyes, a hint of knowing more than he lets on. This Neil balances the hero's rigid focus with warm humor. One reviewer described him as cavalier, laid back, and rakishly disheveled, precisely the kind of partner the protagonist needs. In practice, Pattinson's performance feels like the one stable force in a whirlwind plot. He's the reliable friend who covers the hero's back, with an easy grace in action scenes and clever explanations in exposition scenes. In the end, it's his acceptance of fate that lends the film its most emotional weight. But without spoiling that reveal here, in case you haven't seen the film, suffice it to say, Pattinson kept Neil charismatic and grounded throughout. In The Rover, Pattinson plays Ray, a timid loner in a bleak post-apocalyptic Australia. Here his approach is almost the opposite of Tennant's Neil, quiet, deferential, and coated with fear. In interviews, he explained that Ray has absolutely no faith in himself and has been profoundly bullied, so he doesn't even realize it. As the story progresses, he reluctantly follows Guy Pearce's violent Eric like a lost dog. Pattinson leaned into Ray's uncertainty and nervous stutter. When Eric shouts at him, even calling him half-wit, Pattinson plays Ray as grateful to be noticed at all. He said in conversation that Ray is happy to just follow him around like a dog, because Eric is the first person who actually listens to him. In practice, this meant Pattinson often looks away, small in the frame, as Pierce towers over him. Then he allows a tiny flicker of confidence when Eric grudgingly speaks to him kindly. It's a muted performance that highlights Ray's innocence in a savage world. Again, Pattinson's choices serve the film's bleak theme. Under his easy veneer is a boy shaped by loss and helplessness, so that when he finally stands up or flares with anger, it's believable. His French accent, playing a European immigrant, even adds to the sense that Ray is out of place. Overall in The Rover, Pattinson plays subdued and searching, showing the human side of a background character. By the end, we care deeply about this scared young man, largely due to Pattinson's tender portrayal. Next is Cosmopolis. This was a major shift, a talky, surreal Parasite satire by David Cronenberg, in which Pattinson plays billionaire Eric Packer, confined to a limo for a day. It's almost all dialogue and ideas, and Pattinson had to carry each scene with just his face and voice. He absolutely met the challenge. Cronenberg noted that Pattinson turned in a performance worlds away from the wan, glittery vampire he became known for, and said he showed considerable depth. Pattinson made Eric an inscrutable tycoon, at times flippant, at times desperate, who clings to control even as his empire crumbles in front of him. He never smiles broadly. Instead, he almost whispers or speaks dryly, as if bored with everything except his own power. The character is so full of rage and existential angst, but he masks it behind corporate calm. In interviews, Pattinson pointed out that Eric isn't exactly nihilistic, but has a sense of futility. He thinks he's getting closer to something, and everything starts falling away. This tension, this character who is hyper-capable yet utterly lost, is what Pattinson conveys. His interactions with all the limo passengers, from Paul Giamatti to Kevin Durand, become charged dialogues. By fluctuating between detached arrogance and sudden cruelty, he supports the film's critique of capitalism and alienation. Moving to part, he approached Cedric with professionalism, even auditioning with a sense of anxiety until he found his place. He later said he went into Harry Potter determined to seem like a real actor, which meant he tried to be sincere and earnest rather than just a teen wrong. In interviews, he noted how physically demanding the role was, doing the dangerous maze stunt work and underwater scenes with minimal training, and that toughened tragedy poignant. Though this was a far cry from the tortured artist roles he'd take later, it already demonstrated a strand of his range, and honor. In High Life, director Claire Denis again cast Pattinson in dark, unconventional territory. He portrays Monty, a solitary prisoner on a spaceship who is simultaneously caring for a baby and battling his own demons. Pattinson sunk into Denis's auteur style, quiet minimalism punctuated by bursts of intensity. One critic wrote that he conveys repressed desires very well, fitting the mold of a Denis protagonist, an inscrutable loner who teeters on the brink of transgression. Pattinson's Monty often looks vacant and ascetic, as if on autopilot, almost monk-like, yet beneath the surface, he simmers with despair. In interviews, he described Monty's goal as a kind of emotional annihilation. I want to wake up and feel nothing, figuring out how to get rid of anything that is alive in me. On film, this plays out in muted moments, staring out a window, shooting drugged space goats, and occasional outbursts when he loses control. Pattinson holds himself still in many scenes, conveying the character's trauma, but the moments when he snaps, whether pain or passion, are stunning for their raw power. He also shows tenderness, especially in scenes with the baby, suggesting Monty's broken humanity. Overall, Pattinson's performance in High Life is subtle yet intense. He underplays initial compliance and gradually lets Monty's buried anguish surface, supporting Denis's theme of humanity clinging to life in even the darkest places. In the Netflix film The King, Pattinson appears as the Dauphin of France, a small role, but an eye-catching one. Here he leapt into comedy and vanity. With a giant wig and an over-the-top French accent, his Dauphin is both ridiculous and strangely compelling. Pattinson clearly relished hamming it up, tossing out lines with swagger and absurd wit about King Henry's tiny crown jewels, as one scene famously does. He took genuine risks and took on this small but pivotal role. In doing so, He earned laughs and became the audience's favorite part of that film. This performance is a reminder that Pattinson can play flamboyance and satire too, a far cry from his silent torturers or earnest romantics. It shows he can inhabit the full humor absurdity side of acting, embracing a stylized villain completely. Finally, Remember Me is a romantic drama where Pattinson's character, Tyler Hawkins, is a troubled college student dealing with family tragedy. Although many at the time dismissed the film because of his Twilight fame, reviewers observed that Pattinson embodied Tyler's passion and pain genuinely. He navigates a spectrum of emotions as Tyler, at once angry and protective, sad and flirtatious. He's on stage in scenes yelling at his father or tearing up at personal loss. Then, he's engaged and loving when with Amélie de Ravin's character. In doing so, he threads the film's themes of grief and love. His performance provides the keystone around which the other characters' tragedies revolve. In short, even his earlier work shows a willingness to dig into tough emotional material, and audiences found that Pattinson could carry those dramatic highs and lows, often offset by some genuine chemistry with his co-stars. Taken together, these roles paint the full spectrum of Pattinson's acting range. From brooding lover to self-destructive soul, from comedian to despot to dreamer, he never plays it safe. He throws himself into the deep end for every part, even to the point of inducing nausea on purpose, so that each character feels lived in. In one film, he's nearly feral, in the next, he's charmingly urbane. In everyone he plays, there's always a hint that something unexpected could happen. As a result, Pattinson has become an actor who defies easy categorization. He can command a blockbuster action sequence with ferocity, and in the next moment deliver a stripped-down monologue on a tiny indie set with the same intensity. Looking back on these varied performances, it's clear that he taps into everything from raw instinct and humor to vulnerability and nihilism. In every case, he seems driven to find what's most truthful or unsettling in the character, be it fear, shame, arrogance, or innocence, and isn't afraid to go to extremes to show it. His career trajectory shows that he continually reinvents himself, never staying in one lane. Whether playing a tragic romantic or an unhinged madman, Pattinson's choices consistently serve each film's broader themes, making even wildly different roles feel authentic. In sum, he has proven himself capable of anything from delicate warmth to unsettling menace, a chameleon who fully inhabits the many personas on his resume. All of which brings us to a conclusion. As a performer, Robert Pattinson has traversed an astonishing range, and by examining these 11 films, we see that span in full. Robert Pattinson has too much range.